When I was a kid, I wanted to be on one of those crash course videos, so I guess this is just the next best alternative. This is my dog. She won't leave me alone. I've been trying to record this video and she just keeps on sitting here, so she's gonna be here. She'll be quiet, I promise. And yeah, we'll get on with it. Wyke wrote that 20th century historians of ancient Rome have structured the queen, being Queen Cleopatra, as an erotic object both for the male author of the narrative and for the male reader which that narrative has presupposed. Women in history are normally portrayed as, to put it bluntly, property, and in many of these stories that's the only record we see. I'm not here to change Livy's ideas and perspectives about women, and I'm certainly not here to edit the canon that he's created, but I'd like to look at that canon from a different lens. I'd like to look at these women as agents and catalysts of political change. This is my podcast / video on the political perception of women in the mythos of the Roman Empire. So let's talk about the word rape. In modern English, it refers to unconsensual sexual acts, which can be enacted through physical force, coercion, or any other means. There's plenty of discourse and nitpicking from people, mostly people on the internet, but for our intents and purposes, that's what I'm going to be referring to when talking about rape. Our word rape comes from the Latin word rapio, meaning to snatch or carry off. This word is used in context of sexual assault, but it's also referred to when talking about thievery or sieging a city. Mary Beard gave a great talk at the University of Edinburgh called Lucretia and the Politics of Sexual Violence. In it, she discusses some of the foundational stories of the Roman Empire, the ones used to show the morals and values of the civilization. So it's interesting that sexual violence and sexual assault comes up so frequently. Lucretia is the most prominent story that she uses. She's the wife of a soldier who commits suicide after being raped by Sextus Tarquinius, the son of the king. The story goes that the soldiers were having a contest to see whose wife was the most virtuous, and after she won, or rather, after her husband won, Sextus Tarquinius wants to sleep with Lucretia so bad that he threatens to kill her and also kill a male slave to make it look like they're sleeping together. She ends up agreeing to have sex with him because obviously this threat is too great to both her reputation and her pride, and her virtues and her honor. So she tells her husband and father immediately afterwards, her husband and father being two different people, just to clarify. She says that only her body was violated, but her mind is innocent. She then kills herself so that any unchaste woman can't use her as an example, which is super messed up, but also seen as incredibly virtuous. Her husband and her father were so distraught that they led a rebellion to overthrow the monarchy and turned Rome from a kingdom into this quasi-democratic republic. This story is seen in ancient Rome as the epitome of honor and virtue, along with stories such as the rape of the Sabine women or Virginia's father stabbing her to death so that she won't be Appius Claudius's sex slave. We see sexual assault and violence as a catalyst for political change. Each story of assault ends with these women, or their deaths, providing a reason to change the system that killed them. But what about the women who weren't sexually assaulted? Surprisingly, there's quite a few of them, and we're going to focus on Cornelia, who is known mostly for being the mother of the Gracchi brothers, but she's also the daughter of Scipio. So she marries Tiberius Gracchus when he's already fairly old, but they loved each other and they had 12 kids together. One day, Tiberius catches 2 snakes on his couch, and his diviner tells him that he has to kill one of them. If he kills the male snake, he will die, but if he kills the female snake, Cornelia will. And he decides that since Cornelia is still pretty young, and she's a good and virtuous woman, he'll just kill the male snake. Sure enough, he dies. Cornelia raises her children well as a widow, teaching them to be virtuous and noble, as well as training them to handle political power. Since women aren't supposed to be involved with politics at this time, There really isn't a gauge to like the influence she had on her sons' political careers, but historians pretty much agree that it was her education and parenting that allowed her sons to reach the heights that they did. However, her most celebrated trait is not her parenting, it's her stoicism. She doesn't mourn her husband or her sons when they're killed. She lets reason and rationality dominate over grief and emotion. When Ptolemy VIII, who's Cleopatra's younger brother, asks for her hand in marriage, she declines, instead focusing her energy towards raising her children. When her sons die, she moves on. This is celebrated as the correct and virtuous response to tragedy, and she is still regarded to this day as a glowing example of motherhood. As a female college student, the dichotomy of beauty and brains is something that I've had to deal with quite regularly. When I present as more conventionally attractive, I am often not taken as seriously. And this has its pros and cons. Beauty has historically been a way for women to hold power over men, seen as a trick to trap men into making bad decisions. In the modern day, this is seen in women seducing men into cheating on their wives, or having sexual relationships with multiple men, or sleeping with men for personal or material gain. In Cleopatra's time, it was also seen as seducing men into cheating on their wives, having sexual relationships with multiple men, and sleeping with men for personal or material gain. Things that she allegedly did throughout her life. We know that she was powerful and she was intelligent and charismatic, but the reality is that we don't know if she was beautiful or not. There's a possibility that her status as this beautiful seductress is just a story perpetrated by men, specifically by Octavian, to discredit her reputation as one of the most powerful and greatest leaders of Egypt. There is something so insane to me about the way that Cleopatra has been portrayed throughout history. She was a real person, first and foremost, not entrenched in the mythos like Lucretia is. She was, by all accounts, a very real person. She was born in 69 BCE, and she was the second daughter of Ptolemy VII. The Ptolemies were a dynasty of Greek rulers of Egypt, since at the time Egypt was under Greek rule. When Ptolemy VII died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy VIII, took power of Egypt, but her younger brother kicked her out. So she meets Julius Caesar in 48 BCE, and they have this kind of thing together, and with his help, she defeats her brother's forces and regains control of Egypt. Then in 46 BCE, she gives birth to Caesarion, who is this child that she's had with Caesar. And after Caesar dies, spoiler alert, if you didn't know that about Roman history, she meets Mark Antony, who is super hot and super powerful and also super married to Octavian's sister. So the two of them fall in love and they have kids. And Octavian uses this as the nail in the coffin. He wages the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Mark Antony and Cleopatra both end up committing suicide. But the biggest thing about Cleopatra's legacy is that she is always told in the context of other men. She's told in the context of Caesar, she's told in the context of Mark Antony, and very rarely she's told in the context of Octavian. It seems like she's always the one that is seducing these men and coercing these men, and it's like she's so beautiful that all of these men just end up listening to her. And I think that this narrative really detracts from everything that she was and the kind of leader she was, because there are so many accounts of her being so much more than just beautiful and using her sexuality for power. So she was born into royalty, right? She was one of the Ptolemies. She was born into royalty and she was raised to be a queen. This means a lot more than our sort of American ideas of what regency is, with like tea parties and cake and everything. Cleopatra was a woman who was given a top-tier education, and she was fluent in, at minimum, Latin, Greek, and Egyptian. There's a lot of other sources that say varying things about the number of other languages she spoke, but they all agree that she was an excellent communicator. She was frequently compared to Isis, who is the Egyptian goddess of healing and magic. And you can see this in artistic depictions like paintings and sculptures. She's shown with Isis's headdress and with this sort of reverence around her that gave her this title of Nea Isis, or New Isis. She was seen as this loving mother to both her children and her country. She was known to her people as Philopater, which means loving her forefathers. Philo meaning love, pater meaning fathers, and also as the Philopatrus, so philo again meaning love, and then patris meaning country, or lover of her fatherland. And this is a big deal because she was the first Ptolemy to care for both Greeks and Egyptian subjects. She loved her forefathers, the Ptolemies that came before her, and she honored that heritage, but she also loved the country that she was ruling, instead of just partying it up every night. She was raised to lead, she pushed for economic stability, and she led better than anyone before her. So it's no wonder that so many men fell in love with such an intelligent and powerful woman. She was well-spoken, she was well-educated, she was knowledgeable, and she was charismatic. And it was just seen throughout all of this time that she was much more than just beautiful. Regardless of looks, there are reasons that men would fall in love with her. There's this pretty common quote now that history is told by the winners, and Cleopatra's legacy is a very clear example of this. Octavian was the winner of the Battle of Actium, so it's no shock that Cleopatra is portrayed as this quote-unquote meretrix, mera meaning to gain and trix meaning woman. Octavian pushed this narrative to drive Mark Antony out of power, making Cleopatra out to be this cunning and evil seductress who sleeps with men for political power was an incredibly easy way to paint Mark Antony as a traitorous and untrustworthy leader who was weak enough to be seduced into cheating on his wife, who, again, was Octavian's sister. Especially since Cleopatra bore his children. She had a kid with Caesarion, and then she had twins with Mark Antony. And it's much easier to romanticize and sexualize a woman than it is to respect her. I mean, you've seen this all throughout history, but especially with Cleopatra, the stories of her sneaking into Caesar's palace rolled up into a carpet and getting bit in the breast by a snake to commit suicide are such sexualized stories that we have to wonder what purpose they serve for the narrative that, as Maria Wyke said, structures Cleopatra as an erotic object for both the male author and for the male reader, which the narrative has presupposed. And that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for listening. Shout out especially to my professor, Michael Ritter, and to Mary Beard. All of my sources are cited in the description. I hope you have a great day and you continue to view history complexly and critically. Thank you.